Apple Notes is phenomenal. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably already know that. Now, also, if you're watching this video, you may or may not know that I am currently in the middle of a 3-month experiment using only Apple's productivity tools. That's Reminders, Apple Notes, and Calendar. And today I want to take you into my discoveries with Apple Notes and why I think it is such a phenomenal productivity tool. Now, I organize my notes using a system I call Gapra, which is loosely based on Tiago Forte's Para. The only difference is that I believe that my higher values, if you like, so my goals and my areas of focus, and we'll get to those in a moment, are at the top level because they are the top level of my life. Then it's followed by my projects, my resources, and my archive. Now, this video isn't about how I organize my notes, but I do want to share with you one area from my goals area. So one of the things that I did was, while I was writing my book, Your Time, Your Way, I cut down on my exercise somewhat, and that caused a corresponding increase in my weight. So my weight went up by about 8 kilograms, which I'm not sure what that would be in pounds, but it's probably about 15, 16 pounds or so. So my goal this year, when I started out the year, was to get my weight back down to where it should be, which is 80 kilograms. Now, I've done that already, and that's already in my goals. But what I used Apple Notes for, or what I actually use my regular Notes app for, is to track my weight. So every time I take my weight, I put the date I took the weight, and then I keep the reading, the weight I am. And obviously Apple Notes can do this phenomenally well. All I need to do is just go into my goals, personal weight tracker, and put my weight, existing weight in there. That's great. So that's how I use my goals. It's for measuring however way I'm measuring the goal that I'm actually trying to accomplish. Okay, so move on to the areas of focus. These are the 8 areas of focus that we all share. They revolve around family and relationships, your finances, your career, your profession. It also your life experiences and lifestyle. It also self-development, health and fitness, anything like that. Those are the 8 parts of the 8 areas of focus that we all share, that we just define differently and prioritize differently. And this is where I keep my areas of focus, I keep my definitions and the action steps that I want, which makes it so much easier to go back and review these whenever I feel like something's amiss, something's not quite running operationally. That's where I go. Projects probably are self-explanatory, all my project stuff in there, and we'll come back to those in a moment. And then I have my resources. Now the resources is the catch-all folder. This is where I put all sorts of little stuff in there. Things like my purchases list, so my suppliers list if you like. So this is where I will buy things like keep records of my socks, or where I buy these sweaters, or anything like that. I keep them in here so that I can keep a track of my sizes and obviously the link to the website. And then the archive is for anything that is no longer required. I'm no longer acting on it, but I may wish to keep it in the future. So there's a quick rundown of my Gapra system. If you want to learn more about Gapra, I've done a video on it. I'll put that in the show notes below. So the best way for me to demonstrate how Apple Notes and why I think Apple Notes is so phenomenal is to take you through a project. So I'm currently in the middle of doing a workshop. It's the last workshop of 2025. And I want to take you through how I organize or manage this project because it's quite an extensive project. So this is going to be created in a folder, which Apple Notes does very well. Now, just to keep in mind, Apple Notes has essentially 3 levels, as does Microsoft OneNote, and so does Evernote. In Apple World, it's folders, subfolders, and notes. In Evernote, it's stacks, notebooks, notes. In Microsoft OneNote, it's notebooks, sections, pages. But essentially they mean the same thing. There are 3 levels. Now you can probably, if you wish, create subfolders on subfolders on subfolders, but that's just making it incredibly messy and complicated, which is not something I would get involved in. But in this particular project, I will have certainly 3 notes. I have the master note, which is pinned to the top of the folder. And then I have day 1 and day 2 speaker notes, where I keep all the stuff that I need on the screen that's going to make my life so much easier when I'm doing the workshop. Now, one thing I really like about Apple Notes is that you can pull out the note. So you can double click on the note and it will open up in its own little window. So then you can move the main notes window out of the way. So you can then resize this note however way you like it, so it's not taking up too much screen real estate. Now, I should say that Evernote does this as well, but Microsoft OneNote doesn't, which I've always found quite frustrating with Microsoft OneNote. So another good feature about Apple Notes is note linking. So I can actually link the speaker notes to the master note. So it just makes it so much easier for me to get to whatever day that I am on with the workshop, and then I can get straight to that speaker note. I don't have to go searching around. Now, in this particular project, there's only 3 notes, so it doesn't really matter. But there can be projects that I know some of you will be working on that may have a lot of different notes. For instance, you may have a meeting note because you're working with colleagues and you keep all your meeting notes in a single note. Now, in the master note, the one at the top, you can actually just backlink, if you like, or link those meeting notes to the master list, so that you can just click on that and bang, that will open. Similarly, you might have messages from Teams or Slack, or you may have emails that you want to keep in that project folder because they're relevant to the project. Therefore, again, you can actually just backlink that note into the master note so you can find it. But one of the things that I always do with my projects is at the top level of the project note, I will put links to any documents that I'm using for this particular project. Now, in this case, I have a Keynote file that I will be using in the workshop. Therefore, that is linked here up at the top. If I click that, that's going to open up the Keynote file. That means that I can get straight on to working on that file. Now, there is a problem here. If you drag, which you can do, you can drag the Keynote file into Apple Notes. What's going to happen is you're going to create a copy of the original. What you want to be doing is going into the share sheet and sharing, getting the link to that particular Keynote file and putting that in there as a clickable link. If you drag and drop into it, you're just going to be creating multiple copies of the file. And if you update the main file, then the file in Apple Notes is not going to get updated and it's going to be a mess. So make sure if you do want to do this, that you actually get the link from the iCloud file, which is the Keynote file, and put that into your Apple Notes. So when you click on it, it opens up the file as is, rather than just a copy of it. Another thing I will put up there is things like the participants list, which is going to be on here, and there will be other things that I will add in there as and when. Now, underneath that is where I put my next actions, and there's a reason for that. Projects can get very messy because there's a lot of stuff going on. Now, some projects are very simple and probably don't need a lot of action steps to complete. But this particular project and many of the other projects that I work on can become very complex. Now, if I put these next actions into reminders, they're going to start getting disjointed. They're going to start moving away from each other. Some will be in next week, some will be in the week after. I don't know when some of these steps are going to be taken. Now, to simplify that mess, what I do is I keep my next actions list in Apple Reminders. And once again, Apple Reminders is superb at this because of the checklist feature, which you can also create a smart folder to get anything, any task or any checklist that's not been completed. I will do that in a future video. But the beauty of doing it this way is all I now need in Reminders is one single task which says continue working on this project. And then I can link this note to that reminder. So rather than having multiple different reminders or projects, and I could be working on 3 or 4 projects at the same time, it just becomes a mess in reminders and I don't know where everything is. This way, if I know, for instance, I'm working on this particular project this week, then everything is in one single place. It's in my master project note for this project. And that way, when I'm working on it, because that's what I'm going to be doing for an hour and a half, 2 hours or whatever, I'm working on this project. All I need is this project note. I can check off the tasks that I've done, and that way I know when I come back to the project another day, I can instantly see what I've done and then what needs to be done. Now, if I put this in reminders, once I check off the task, it's gone, it disappears. Now, you can go into your completed and show your completed task, but again, you've got multiple other completed tasks and you've got to try and find it. This is such a waste of time. Here, everything is in a single place. I can see instantly what I've done and what remains to be done. So that's the next part of my project list, if you like, is the next actions. And as I say, Apple Notes does this superbly. Now, another way that Apple Notes does really well, and it's, I suppose any Notes app would do this, but this means that you need to kind of forward think. And that is with newsletters. Now, we all get a lot of newsletters. Now, you can use systems like Readwise or Instapaper to put all these newsletters. But again, it always will come back to that one fundamental problem that isn't that actually where you store it. The problem is finding the time to read these newsletters. Now, what I do is when a newsletter comes in, it will come into my email because I like them. I'm very particular about curating what newsletters I get, and I will subscribe from emails that I'm not particularly interested in or don't bring me any value. But certainly things like James Clear's 123 newsletter, Kurosh Dini's newsletter, Waves of Focus, and Simon Jeffrey's Natural Edge newsletter, there's often a lot of gold in there, and I don't want necessarily to have the whole email. What I like to do is just get a snapshot of the bit that I think is really good, and that means I have a note for each of these people, like James Clear, Kurosh Dini, Simon Jeffreys, in my resources under newsletters. And then I will just copy and paste the bit that I find interesting directly into Apple Notes. Now, I do this on my laptop, which means that I can also drag the original email underneath the bit that I've quoted. That way, if I want to go back to see the full context of the newsletter, I can just click on that and the email will come back. Just a quick caveat there, if you delete the email, eventually after 30 days, that link will break because the email will be deleted. What I do is any email where I do copy, I just send to archive. So it's always available. If I want to do a bit of research, I can just go straight into these folders and I can get straight back to the original email if I want the context. Overall though, I see my Notes app, whether it's Evernote or whether it's Apple Notes, as my support tool. It collects information that I may need to collect later. Now this all comes back from my original usage of Franklin Planner, where you kept your projects at the back of the planner. You also had your, what they call your governing values, what I see as my areas of focus, all contained within the Franklin Planner. I do this with my Notes app, which is why I have the areas of focus in there and my goals tracker so I can track my goals. But the key thing with Apple Notes and actually with reminders is when you're using these consistently, it becomes pretty obvious that actually these tools are optimized for mobile devices, whether it's the iPad or your iPhone. On the desktop, they just feel like there's something lacking. And this is where my little problem with them come. I'm a Todoist user normally, as well as an Evernote user, and their tools are probably not so good on mobile devices as the Apple tools are, but they are superb on the desktop. So if you're in the mobile world rather than the desktop world, if you're using an iPad or you're using an iPhone, you'll probably find that reminders and Apple Notes are just the best. And I would agree with you, they are the best tools on mobile devices. But I do a lot of my work is from a laptop because I'm creating content. I'm doing a lot of writing and I just use my laptop more than I use my other tools. So I see my mobile devices as the collection buckets because they are so good. On my phone, I can collect tasks directly into reminders. I've set up some shortcuts. I am going to do a video on shortcuts, don't worry. I've set up some simple shortcuts that means I can get my content ideas directly into Apple Notes. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do on the mobiles devices with these tools. But overall, Apple Notes is phenomenal. It is a superb tool. It does the thing that it's supposed to do, which is to collect your notes. Once again, for a lot of power users who like to use things like Markdown, although Apple Notes will recognize that now, or create snippets of code, there are better notes tools out there. But for everyday use, for the everyday person who isn't a power user, Apple Notes would be your best option out there if you're in the Apple ecosystem. So there you go. That's my first update on Apple Notes. I hope you found this helpful. If you want to learn more about my Apple productivity experiment, which has about 6 weeks to go, then this video up here is the one to watch next.